Hi everyone, my name is Sadie and today I'll be talking about my favorite reads in 2015. Now I know this video is going up a bit late, but I still wanted to share with you guys all my favorite reads in 2015. Okay, so the way a book becomes a favorite of mine is that once I pick it up, I can't put it down. And once I finish it, I have this great impulse to tell everybody else how great that book was. So the books that made the list this year, not all of them came out in 2015, but they were the ones I read in 2015 and I consider them my favorites. So let's get started. Now these books have no particular order. This is actually really hard to choose from. So the first one I'm going to mention is one of the last books I read in 2015, and that would be The Fallen Kingdoms by Morgan Road. Now this book is pretty intense since it's got this Game of Thrones vibe and it follows multiple characters from 4 different kingdoms. This is actually the first book in a series, so if you haven't started this series yet, I actually really recommend for you to start it. It's so good. The next book on my list is MISTBORN by Brandon Sanderson. Now this book is what you describe epic because of its story, plotline, and action-packed, and also because of its unique magic system called allomancy. I really recommend this book. Actually, I recommend all the other books I'm about to mention throughout this video. So this book is about a girl named WYNNE who is part of this thieving group who has been given the mission to overthrowing their government. So it involves a really good heist here, so if you're interested in that, I also have a book talk about the MISTBORN book, and I'll leave that down in the description box, so if you want to check it out, you're welcome to it. The next book in this video is A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. Now this story is actually a retelling of the fairy tale Sleeping Beauty. It follows a girl named Feyre who, while hunting for food for her family, ends up killing this wolf who, by doing so, sets a lot of things in motion for her encounter with what in the fairy tale would be the beast. But in this case, he is actually a very handsome High Lord fairy. This book is really intense, both in action and in the romantic side. This is actually the second series that Sarah J. Maas is starting. Now I said this before, how this is actually a retelling of Sleeping Beauty, but as you read the book, you can tell how it starts differing from it and how it starts creating a whole different story, even though its origins were from the Sleeping Beauty. So it's a really good book. You should check it out, and trust me, you won't regret reading this book. Now the next book on my list is The Heart of Betrayal by Mary E. Pearson. Now I can't talk about much about this book since it's the second book to the first book called The Kiss of Deception. Now this book follows the story of this girl named Leah who turns out to be a princess who flees on the day of her wedding and goes and lives by this tavern where she works. Now while she's working there, 2 mysterious guys come, and this is where the story just starts developing, and it starts getting really interesting because all we know is that one's a prince and one's an assassin. Now the one thing I can mention is that what I really love from the second book is, even though it didn't exactly blow my mind away like the first one is, because The Kiss of Deception up to so far is like by far my #1 favorite book of all times. But what I liked about the second one is that despite it being the second book in a series, it was actually pretty good for it. I read other series where the second book were just like, it just made you, I guess you could say, a little bit disappointed. Not exactly what you were expecting it. Like you read the first book and you were just expecting for the second one just to be the same as good and just keep you excited and all that stuff. But in this case, the book actually did do that for me. Maybe not as much as the first one, but it was just really different from the other series I've read. And another thing that I like too is that some of the things that were decided in the first book were kept in the second book. So I guess this is all what I will be discussing about the second book. The next book is called HOWL'S Moving Castle by Diana Wayne Jones. Now this book is, well actually I saw the film first before I actually read the book. It was because of the film that I was curious and I really wanted to read the book. So when I actually got to read the book, it's just one of those books where I love the book and I love the film. I love them both, even though they are a bit changes from it. Since not everything that's in the novel gets to be portrayed in the movie. This movie was done by the great Japanese filmmaker called Hayao Miyazaki. If you really want to check that out, that's okay too. The story was beautifully written. We see great adventure, we see romance, and it's just so far from the Japanese films that I've seen, it's just one of my favorites. So you should definitely read HOWL'S Moving Castle. Now the story of HOWL'S Moving Castle follows the story of this girl named Sophie who gets cursed with the appearance of an old lady. Now once she sees this curse take in action, she leaves her family and her home. She goes into the wilderness where she eventually encounters this movie structure called HOWL'S Moving Castle. She later becomes the house cleaning lady for the wizard Howl. And I can't tell you more about it because you have to find out what really happens. Now, the next book is a contemporary romance, which I really don't read much contemporary novels since I'm actually a sucker for fantasy novels. But what I really liked about this one is how I could relate to some aspects to the protagonist from the story. Now this story is called The Year I Became Isabella Anders by Jessica Sorensen. Like I said, the reason why this book became one of my favorite books is because of how I could relate to her. Now the story evolves around Isabella Anders and this girl who she loves to paint, she loves to draw, especially draw comics, and she loves zombies. Now, things happen throughout the story that it's not your typical contemporary novel where everything's lovely-dovey. No, this is just actually pretty different, and it's also a story about self-discovering and just embracing who you are, which is what I really liked about this novel too. And it's actually the first book in the series. Now as you start finishing the book, you start getting this Cinderella vibe, which is what also made the whole story more interesting and what I actually like, because aside from fantasy novels, I actually really like really good fairy tale retelling. So this is why this book made my list. Now, the next book I'm going to talk about is An Ember in the Ashes by SABAA TAHIR. Now, this book actually kept me on the edge of my seat every time I read it, and it was just so exciting to read. It was just so new and different. In this novel, you can also see just a great character development from both characters, because this story is told from a dual point of view, a male character and a female character. This is actually the first book that SABAA TAHIR wrote, and just let me tell you, her writing was fantastic. It was just so gripping from the moment you started reading. You could just tell how gripping it was and how it just gets to you, and you don't want to put it down until you finish reading it. And once you finish reading it, you're just like, I want more. Which thankfully, it was confirmed already that we are getting a sequel this year in 2016. And last but not least, we have in this video Queen of Shadows by Sarah J. Maas. Now this book, holy crackers, this book was so good and so intense, and so many things happened, so many things I didn't expect happened, and so many things I wanted to happen, and it was just so good, it was just so great. I don't know, I really wish everyone could just read it and just love it as much as I do. Now this book is actually the 4th installment of the Throne of Glass series, and it's also by Sarah J. Maas, and so far she's just like one of my favorite authors so far that I read. Like, Sarah J. Maas was the one who got me into fantasy reading, so for that I have to thank her. So there you have it, guys. Those are all my favorite reads in 2015. I would also like to know what were your favorite reads in 2015. So thanks for watching, and I guess I'll see you on a video soon. Bye!